Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It's Friday, May 17th, and welcome to another episode of Stoppage Time with me, Uncle Rob. I'm down here in South Orange County, California, about an hour-ish south of Los Angeles. I promised you I'd be back every Friday, and that this Friday I'd be in a different location. Here I am. I'm not at home in my apartment in Hollywood because my apartment's being remodeled. So I'm down here actually being Uncle Rob in the lives of two of my nieces, a couple of Gen Alpha, Gen Z, youngsters that are keeping me fresh, teaching me all the cool lingo, helping me stay relevant with what's going on in the world. But while down here, I want to hit on three big topics that have been on my mind. Toss in a book recommendation this week. Super excited to share some of this information with you. So let's get into it. Three big topics. One, new young leaders, the importance of new young leaders. Two, housing, and more housing. Three, leapfrogging. Clever book recommendation, leapfrogging to our new majority. So first things first, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that every organization, that every community, no matter its size, no matter its relevance in its industry or in society, refresh itself from time to time. And I've said oftentimes, I feel like we're in a transitional moment as a country, as a world, across industries, that we're moving from kind of the world that was, say, 1970 to 2020 and probably into a world that'll be 2025 to 2075 or further, right? And so I had the real pleasure this week of learning again or being reminded again firsthand in conversations that were part of interviews setting up future upcoming episodes of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. So you're not going to want to miss that. With just a crop of young, fresh leaders and just really authentic people who kind of look at their job opportunities, look at their industries, look at the sectors that they work in, or look at their communities in just fresh, different, vibrant ways. And ultimately, as you would imagine, right, I view these people as entrepreneurial thinkers in their own rights. This week's episode that's going to be dropping on audio on Thursday of this week, and then on video on YouTube on Monday of next week, is with Greg Mitchell from AVP Ventures in Peru. And Greg's is just a fascinating story. Like if you want to learn about venture capital, if you want to learn about venture capital with purpose, if you want to learn about what it's like to build a venture capital firm who not only sees their responsibility as creating returns for their limited investors, but also sees themselves as a responsible part of a community, of an ecosystem, and has like an obligation to develop talent as part of their mission and essentially feed or seed the next generation of Latin American investors and venture capitalists in Peru and beyond, then you're going to want to listen to Greg's story. Greg's story himself is fascinating. He's a Connecticut guy, an East Coast guy who found his way into the Peace Corps after college, wound up finding his way into Central America, loved what he experienced there, came back to graduate school with the specific purpose of taking what he was going to learn both in the Peace Corps and his graduate school experiences, then bringing it back to South America, in this case, to Peru, and getting involved in the investment world. It's a fascinating, unconventional route. And so please go find that episode on your podcasting platforms or on YouTube as soon as you can, because I'm convinced that you'll enjoy it as much as we did making it. But I was also fortunate. Greg's wasn't the only refreshing, innovative, young conversation I got to have. I got to have conversations this week with Erika Bricky from ARC. I got to have conversations with Pedro Crespo from CoreNest, and I got to talk to Mario Carrasco here in LA from Think Now. And each of them attack their industries, their jobs, and their lives with just this kind of refreshing outsider's energy that just reminds us how much is possible when we kind of break from convention and apply mostly just our authentic selves. I know that's a really overused phrase nowadays, be your authentic self, right? But in these three relatively young people, I was able to be so energized and so reminded about the upside of our potential, that it just really, it was the top of my list with things I wanted to talk about with you all, because I think so much today we get caught up in the negative spin, we get caught up in kind of the negative doom loop, so to speak, of everything that's wrong with kind of society, everything that's wrong with our industries, how basically everything is so dominated by essentially elite, rich, white old men, and it is, right? And that is all 100% true. And but the key is what we do with that information, right? And do we take that and do we become discouraged and kind of lose hope, Or do we dive a little bit deeper? And this last week and a half, 2 weeks, I got to dive a lot deeper and realize that there are so many good, bright, hardworking, earnest young people that are already doing good work, but are kind of ready to take the realm or the helm, I should say, of leadership going forward. So I'm more excited than ever about the future of not only my city and my state here in Los Angeles and in California, but of the country and of the region, the Americas from north to south, and then the world. Because I just know that there is this crop of people. I'm excited to be able to use Entrepreneurial Thinkers very intentionally as a platform to have these people share their stories and their perspectives on the things that they work on or the lives that they lead, because not everybody gives people like these people a chance. Not everybody gives people like these people a platform. We saw some really just ridiculously stupid stories that got platformed this week across social media with people who, frankly, I'm embarrassed and ashamed and angered by the fact that organizations will give some of these people platforms to spew their hate speech and their misogyny and their racism and their homophobia and their narrow-mindedness that wants to somehow like kind of go back, right, and make things great like they used to be, or return us to an earlier era when it was better. And that is a prevalent American problem right now culturally, but it is not an only American problem. And so to me, the counterbalance of that is these young people. So having said that, that's a great segue to kind of the other topic of the day. There are a million different topics I could have hit on this week and talked about in much greater depth, but honestly, none of them resonated with me. A lot of them just kind of felt cheap, and it would have been just piling on my own opinions about things that everybody already knows to be true. But I was struck by a couple of stories, three in particular, around this idea of housing. You know me, I'm a huge advocate that we need to be building more of everything everywhere. We need to be building more infrastructure. We need to be building more rail. We need to be building more walkable neighborhoods. We need to be building more walkable, accessible retail. We need to be building more bicycle infrastructure. We need to be building more clean, green energy. We need to just be building, right? In Los Angeles, we are in the midst of the largest infrastructure investment project and building project in American history. With the work that is going on around the city, in our metro system, our subway and light rail systems, our bus systems, in our airports. And so like I can see literally every day when I walk around the city, the benefit and the future benefit that'll come for the next 50 to 100 years. The only way we get ourselves out of some of the difficulties that we've currently worked our way into over the last 4 years is to build more. And so I was really, 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 really encouraged this week to see three cool stories. I'm going to glance away for a second here. So there's a bill here in the California legislature called AB 3068. And what's so fascinating to me about this is the two historically completely diametrically opposed, usually at odds, groups. The YIMBYs, the Yes in My Backyard, a very pro-development group here in the state of California, and then the California Preservation Foundation, or a Historical Preservation Society, which historically is like goes out of their way to slow development down or eliminate development in areas where there could be much more development. Those two groups got together. Those two groups compromised and actually actively supported a piece of legislation which is designed to help make it much, much easier in urban downtown cores to redevelop offices and commercial spaces into residential housing. Now, I know the statistics that only probably 19 to like 28% of commercial space or office space is easily or even technically able to be converted. But I'm going to tell you right now, when we talk about a couple more of the statistics, that if we could do that, that 19% would be hugely valuable in the marketplace of housing in the United States. And in specific California. So we're just to give you some ideas, a number of different studies estimate that we're in a housing deficit of about 3.2 million units. And when we say housing, I don't just mean houses. Like I don't just mean single family houses with the front lawn and the green grass and the white picket fence, which was like the American dream of the 1950s and 60s, right? I mean housing. I mean apartments. I mean condominiums. I mean multifamily units. I mean single family houses, yes, et cetera. And so we're about 3.2 million houses short of where we should be to have an equilibrium in the market. And then, of course, when that happens, that then affects prices, right? That drives up and spikes rent, which we've all seen. That drives up and spikes housing prices, which makes it inaffordable and less accessible for people who otherwise could have afforded to put their family into better housing or into new houses or home ownership. It isn't just some market macroeconomic thing that's going on here. This is a supply and demand issue, and we had stopped building for a long time. And it's now time to come out of that sleepy doldrum and start rebuilding aggressively. So that was one piece of encouraging news on the housing front that I was excited about. The second is President Biden's administration has already put forth policy as well as funding to support the building and specifically the encouraged building of 2 million more housing units, right? As well as then a number of tax incentives to try and help young first-time buyers or first-time home buyers to get into the housing market themselves in a little bit less financially stressful way. So that's great, right? And then the final bit of good news here is that apartment construction actually hit an all-time high since they started measuring this stuff. It hit an all-time high in 2023 with 461,000 units being built. And just to be clear, like for those that misinterpret these issues as being like singularly urban or singularly in the top 4 or 5 big hottest cities in the country, that's just nonsense. And in fact, the data tells us that in the 55 largest housing markets in the United States, so when you go 55, by the way, you are down to some pretty small regional cities or towns. In the 55 largest housing markets in the country, only 3 in the last year have had a net positive, net plus on the housing supply side. And so 52 of the largest housing markets, which again gets down to like some pretty small regional cities and towns, are operating at a housing deficit. So this isn't some just big city, LA, New York, Chicago problem, right? This is a universal issue that the country has an opportunity to course correct. And so it's encouraging to hear that while the negative headline news is, whoa, this is terrible, we're broken, we're never going to be able to do this. The truth is that there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes, and you can encourage this. You can enable this in your own communities, right? This is, again, another kind of great connection between something we need to do to improve our societies and to improve our economic opportunities and new leadership, right? But here's another punchline item on housing, right? This isn't just about housing and like a place to live for you and I, or a better apartment rent for me in Hollywood. Housing and the lack of housing supply and then the inaccessibility and inaffordability of housing is directly linked as one of the core variables that contributes to the homelessness crisis that we are experiencing everywhere in the country. Everywhere in the country is experiencing some levels of homelessness and unhoused populations that are far above what they should be. Yes, large population centers like California or Los Angeles or New York City or Chicago or other major cities have a larger gross number of those folks because we also have larger gross percentages of the population, right? But this is a problem that's persistent, and it ties back to this as one of the main variables. Build more housing, and we probably make huge headway towards reducing homelessness. Of course, yes, homelessness is a multi-variabled, highly complex problem that also is contingent upon accessibility to healthcare, that also is contingent upon proper subsidized state and or governmentally run mental health capabilities and facilities, which we stripped out of our lexicon and out of our kind of tool belt of services, public services over the last 40 to 50 years. So yes, there are a number of variables that are required to address and reduce the homelessness crisis that we're facing and help these of our unhoused neighbors to find their way back into our societies in productive ways and healthy ways for themselves. But housing is a huge piece of that puzzle. So again, new leadership and the need for new housing and more housing are just been on my mind this week. And the final bit of news, or a book recommendation in this context this week, is the book is called, it's Leapfrog, The New Revolution for Women Entrepreneurs. It's by my friend Natalie Molina Nino and her co-author Sarah Grace. I could just tell you that I'm deeply passionate about this book. I have recommended this book hundreds of times over the last 4 or 5 years since it came out. I have personally purchased dozens of copies of this book and then forwarded them or sent them to women entrepreneurs, to young entrepreneurs, to entrepreneurs from underrepresented, undersupported groups in our society. And I got to tell you, it is basically it's a handbook. It's a book that it contains 50 hacks for how to not just build businesses, build your profile, gain access to the corridors of power, raise money, raise venture capital, raise money from other sources, create sales, create revenue. I mean, it is literally just to me, it's the modern day Bible of new modern day entrepreneurship. And it also speaks in particular to the communities that are so disadvantaged by a system, like we talked about in the top of the show here, by a system that is been dominated and essentially designed and built for and by rich, privileged, white, older men, right? So Natalie is just an incredibly powerful Latina. I was lucky to get to know her after establishing an online friendship over the years and being super supportive of everything she's doing. She and I and my daughter got to meet at a film premiere of Into the Heights back in, I think it was 2021 here in LA, which is incredible. She gracious host, incredible person. Her mom was there, really great community of people. And her book has been one I've listened to on Audible multiple times. I'm actually in the last chapters of listening to it again. And so it's been on my mind recently on my walks and hikes. And I just thought, like, this is a great time to share with you, and kind of in the context of this week, right? So new leadership, fresh approaches to old, tired things, old, tired ways, the building of new economies, right? And new housing, as I love to talk about. And then what Natalie's book does is it just highlights how all of that is possible. It can be done. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it can be done. And she has given us not just an inspiring story of her own, but she's given us a blueprint for how to do it in this book. So I really hope you enjoy it. I hope you have an awesome weekend. I hope your stoppage time between the productivity and the fun of this week and the weekend has been super, super enjoyable for you. And I can't wait to see you back here next week for more stoppage time.